Have you ever passed someone on the street whose very presence bends the world as if the air itself recognizes royalty? In the privileged heart of Victoria Island, where wealth sparkled and secrets slithered, there lived a woman who was more than a rumor, more than a face on a magazine, Amora Oronquo. They called her the Queen of Silence. She didn't need a crown. She wore power as naturally as her silk scarves. But her beauty was not the kind that made you comfortable. It was sharp, cold, almost haunting. When she entered a room, conversation stilled, laughter shrank, and eyes stretched wide to catch the shape of her grace. Tall, statuesque, light-skinned, her cheekbones carved by a sculptor who favored drama over comfort, and her eyes narrowed, unfazed, never truly smiling. Every morning, Amora awoke inside Ivory Fortress, a mansion whiter than the clouds that floated above Lagos, surrounded by fragrant gardens that only she could touch, policed by men with stern faces and rigid backs. Her world was closed off by a black iron gate, taller than most men's ambitions, a barrier to curiosity, gossip, and uninvited affection. To outsiders, she wore armor of labels, designer dresses, imported jewelry from Paris, shoes with heels that could command respect. But it was not the fashion that kept her isolated. It was the deliberate absence of repetition. Not once did anyone see her wear the same ensemble twice, and so the whispers grew wild. She values nothing but money. She must have no family, no friends, no soul but the currency of power. Whispers, yes, but also truths. Amora's solitude was not poetic. It was hard, metallic, cold. Only 3 years ago, tragedy had torn her comfort away. Her husband, Dyke Oronquo, rich, handsome, and equally cloaked in mystery, had died abruptly, a silence falling not only in her halls, but also on her future. They had lived childless, and Amora had told herself that work, travel, and the tranquil hum of her luxury car's engine could fill the gaps. She spent her days moving from boardroom to runway, from cold marble floors to first-class flights, returning each night to echoing silence, broken only by the thrum of midnight rain against glass. But beyond the luxury and loneliness, beneath every thread of her designer sheets, fate was preparing to test what she thought she knew of power, loss, and love. It would all begin on one ordinary, rain-soaked afternoon that would rip apart the borders she'd placed around her heart. It was a Thursday that felt as if the sky itself had memories. It wept with a slow fury, veiling the world in cool, gray mist. The clouds turned oppressive and thick, robbing the sun of its voice. Amora sat in the rear seat of her sleek, black Range Rover, her lifeboat through the stormy unpredictability of Lagos traffic, staring listlessly at her phone, the glowing device echoing the cold, distant messages of her life. Her driver, Karu, a man trained in discretion and patience, navigated the clogged roads, glancing nervously at Amora through the rearview mirror as he tried to make polite conversation. "Madam, should I try the lay shortcut?" "This traffic might hold us till night," Carew offered, his voice cautious, aware that Amora's moods rested on fine threads. But Amora was elsewhere, her mind fixed on a text from the board, cold and professional. "Meeting rescheduled to 5 p.m. Please confirm." She let out a sigh no one was supposed to hear and set down her phone. "Go through Ozamba," she ordered. Time had lost its meaning. Ambition, urgency, and pain seemed to blend in a kind of monotony that made rain feel more than just water. As the vehicle crawled along drenched roads, the deluge grew angry. Raindrops splashed heavy against glass, and wipers swung methodically to keep the world visible. On the streets, people dashed desperately for shelter. Some brandished umbrellas, but most stumbled, heads bowed, clothes clinging. The sounds, a medley of horns, shouts, and the desperate rush, formed a symphony of Lagos survival. It was as if every soul was chasing something: escape, hope, or maybe just the next meal. Suddenly, the car lurched to a halt at a red light, clutching the city's heartbeat. Amora's gaze wandered, but a curious tension tugged at her senses. She found herself peering out the window, eyes narrowing, as something, or someone, caught her attention. "What's that?" she murmured, almost to herself. Carew, distracted by the traffic, answered with a puzzled look. "What's what, Ma?" "There, near that pole." "At boy," Amora pointed, voice sharper now. Carew followed her gesture and saw him, a skeletal figure of a child, barely 12, barefoot, trembling in the rain. But what shocked Amora most was not his posture, nor his innocence, but the two fragile babies clutched in his thin arms, their bodies wrapped in makeshift plastic. The tiny twins sobbed, the sound barely audible, but so cutting it made Amora's chest clutch. Most people would have dismissed the scene, a beggar's trick, another tragic child lost in the dance of survival. Carew grunted, half annoyed, half resigned. "They always do this begging trick, Ma." Sometimes they even rent babies, but Amora couldn't move her eyes. The rain blurred the world outside, but the faces of the babies came alive, eyes wide, eyes that seemed bigger than their small, waterlogged frames. Suddenly, Amora's heart clenched with a pain so swift and unnatural. She wondered if she was sick. She leaned forward, breathing hard, searching the faces for something she hadn't even realized she was missing. And then she saw it. The left twin turned, her gaze piercing through the glass, and for a second, the color of her eyes burned into Amora's mind. Hazel, the rare bronze that shimmered even through misery and grime. Amora's stomach twisted. Those eyes, her late husband's eyes. She shook herself, trying to dismiss what had to be a hallucination, a cruel trick of the storm. She glanced toward the second baby, and again, the hazel light. No, it couldn't be. No one has those eyes. Not here. Not like this. Adrenaline surged. Thoughts crashed. Anger, curiosity, even a flinch of hope. Her voice came out sharper than she expected. "Stop the car," she said, urgency pulsing in every syllable. Karu, startled, fumbled with the controls and parked abruptly. Amora pushed open the door, stepping brazenly into the tempest, cold water soaking her expensive dress in seconds. Her heels sunk into the mud, but she didn't falter. Karu ran after her with an umbrella, shouting caution she didn't hear. Amora marched straight toward the scene that would change her life forever. Lightning cracked, shadows shifted, and Amora knelt before the boy, who looked at her with horror and disbelief. His lips didn't move at first. "Who are you?" Amora demanded, voice resonating in the chaos around them. He lowered his head, shielding the twins tightly. Rain poured off him, forming rivers at his feet. I'm Toby," he stammered. Amora's attention flicked to the twins. "Are they yours?" Her voice shook with some emotion she couldn't define. "Yes," he said, pulling the babies closer, using his own body as a shield. She pressed. "Are they your sisters?" A pause. Hesitation. Then, "No." "My daughters." This child claimed fatherhood at 13. Amora pulled back, her mind lurching between incredulity and concern. "You're 13?" Toby nodded defiantly, as if years of suffering had aged him beyond calendar time. The questions pressed on, as rain overflowed the gutters and the cries of the twins grew sharper. "Where is their mother?" Amora asked, her voice low and tense. She died when they were born," Toby muttered, not meeting her eyes. Here lay a story so impossible, it threatened the structure of Amora's carefully built reality. The boy's clothes hung from his bones, soaked and filthy. The babies whimpered, a frail hoarse cry, shallow and desperate. Amora understood on some deep level that this was not a scam. There was a sincerity to Toby's shivering, a truth in his silent grief. She glanced back at Karu, who was awkwardly holding the umbrella, looking as lost as Amora felt. The city's rhythm pulsed around them, the wipers on the car swishing, the rain carving time into anxiety. Amora took authority, the one power she owned beyond question. "Bring them in," she ordered, voice crystallized with command. Karu hesitated, but Amora's tone brooked no argument. "Carry them into the car," she snapped, her patience worn thin. The air thickened with tension. Toby's small face contorted with terror. "Please, don't take them away from me," he pleaded, voice cracking. Amora softened, understanding the boy's fear from whatever world he'd survived. "We're not taking them from you," she promised. "You're coming with us." "No police," she added, her voice gentle now, trying to offer the shelter she herself had needed for years. Toby's suspicion ebbed. Slowly, carefully, step by trembling step, he followed Amora and Karu back toward the Range Rover, the chariot of fate, now cradling secrets, shame, and a strange new hope. Inside, warmth enveloped them, the twins, wrapped in Amora's scarf and shawl, calmed as the heat soaked into their chilled bodies. Toby sat rigid, clothes dripping quietly, eyes darting like a creature adjusting to new captivity. Karu eased the vehicle forward. Amora, meanwhile, could not take her eyes off the twins, off the miraculous hazel that haunted her past and beckoned her future. A silence settled between them. A silence not of emptiness, but of anticipation, as if the walls of the car could feel the tectonic shift that was happening to Amora's world. The mansion loomed at the end of the rain-slicked journey, brilliant white against the gray skies, encircled by solemn palm trees, flowers, and the ever-watchful fence. The gate opened, jaws parting for the Range Rover, as if recognizing that life itself was about to change. Toby's mouth fell open, a tableau of awe, confusion, and fear, a child entering not a home, but a legend. As the car rolled to a stop, staff leapt outside, umbrellas poised, protocol activated. Amora exited first. Babies clutched to her heart, as if they were not only flesh, but proof of some divine reckoning. When an eager worker reached to take the twins, Amora pulled back, voice icy. "Don't touch them." Inside, the mansion glowed with the soft light of privilege, warmth radiating from hidden lamps and scented cleaners. The marble floors stretched endlessly, a giant chandelier casting intricate shadows as music danced through the air. Toby, humble to his core, hovered at the door, glancing down at his muddy feet. Amora noticed, pausing her relentless stride. "Step in," she said, offering a towel from a cabinet. She watched as Toby, nervous but obedient, carefully cleaned his feet, attempting to cleanse not only mud, but years of poverty, rejection, and stigma. The gesture wasn't lost on Amora. Here stood a boy who understood gratitude, dignity, and most of all, shame. She summoned her housekeeper, Noi, a woman dressed in green, efficient, and kind, tasking her with urgency, a bowl of warm water, and a doctor immediately. All the while, Toby soaked in every detail. Paintings, gold trim, the staircase winding like a promise he'd never dared to dream. When Amora settled the twins gently upon a plush couch, a throne for the kingdom of broken souls, she dried their faces and whispered their names. Toby, watching closely, identified each twin, Chidma and Chisholm, 7 months old, living proof of a story too complicated for words. Amora stared at them, heart thumping, unable to unravel how or why this destiny had been dropped in her lap. She wanted to believe she'd rescued someone else, but maybe, just maybe, these children had come to rescue her. Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments, where are you listening from? Segment 6, The Weight of New Beginnings. The mansion became alive with a sense of urgency unfamiliar to its staff, as if the very walls had caught wind of the change that had swept through its gates. Amora presided over the commotion like a conductor in a symphony of chaos. Gone was the serene routine of her evenings. Gone was the calculated predictability of her world. In its place, there was a strange pulse, an underlying tension that throbbed beneath the surface and set her senses on edge. Noi, the ever-dependable housekeeper, moved swiftly with the bowl of steaming water, her hands trained through years of care and diligence. She knelt by the twins, dipping soft towels and wringing them gently, mindful of the delicate skin that bore the scars of rain and neglect. Meanwhile, Toby sat rigid, untrusting, perched at the edge of a gilded chair whose ornate legs seemed almost too extravagant for his reality. He watched every motion with wide eyes, the flecks of terror on his face slowly subsiding in the presence of warmth and kindness. When the doctor arrived, a tall, middle-aged man named Doctor Amora met him at the door, with clipped instructions and a glint of fear she tried to mask. "Check the twins first," she commanded, her voice shielded, the timbre just soft enough to betray the tremor in her heart. "Doctor." Abby moved with calm resolve, examining the infants with gentle fingers, murmuring reassurances that the worst had been averted. They're dehydrated, suffering mild hypothermia, but you acted quickly. "Good instincts, madam," he observed, scribbling notes. Toby's turn came, and Doctor Ebby knelt before him, like a parent attending to a wounded bird. "How long have you been caring for them?" he asked quietly. Toby hesitated. Amora could see the struggle. Years of secrecy, fear of authority, habits born from survival. Finally, he whispered, "Since they were born." 7 months. "You did well, Toby," the doctor said, admiration woven into the syllables. Amora watched the interaction and understood something fundamental. This child's will was titanium. Survival for him wasn't just instinct. It was an art, shaped by desperation and love. When the examinations were over, Dr. Ebby packed up his bag, his assurance leaving a small echo of hope. "They'll need regular meals, clean clothes, follow-up visits," he advised. Amora nodded, mind whirling with logistics, formula, diapers, bottles, medical appointments, all things she had never considered as vital components of daily life. That night, as dusk melted into darkness, Amora wandered through her mansion, the twins asleep nearby, Toby curled like a question mark on the sofa, anxiety slipping away in the warmth. The house quieted but didn't relax. Every corridor echoed with possibility, as if ghosts had stepped aside to make room for new spirits. For the first time in years, Amora didn't feel alone. In the hush, with the moon glimmering through the windows, she realized the weight of new beginnings. In her heart, something unfamiliar stirred, a tenderness locked away since Dyke's funeral, now wakened by 3 fragile souls whose very survival defied the rules she'd written for herself. Sleep was not a luxury that night. Amora found herself pacing the grand hallway, haunted by memories she'd struggled to forget. Images of Dyke, tall and gentle, his laughter echoing like music she could never replay, filled her mind. She remembered the moments they shared, dinners beneath crystal lights, whispered secrets under silk sheets, the way he would brush a lock of hair behind her ear and call her my star. But with every sweet recollection came the jagged truth. He had left her, and she had never truly forgiven him for dying. Throughout those years, Amora's life turned into a parade of business deals and social obligations. There was a mask she wore for the world, a mask carved from strength and elegance. But beneath it lay the fractures of loss. She could not risk vulnerability. Her heart became a fortress, guarded by solitude and the relentless pursuit of success. She scorned relationships, shunned friends who pressed too closely, banned herself from joys that reminded her of what she no longer had. But as she listened to the soft breathing of the twins, as Toby clutched their blankets with a protector's vigilance, the memories shifted. There was a gentleness in the chaos of her new life, a beauty in the mess. Amora found herself tracing the features of the infants, searching for Dyke's face in their hazel eyes, longing for some confirmation that life, in its strange and winding way, could offer second chances. In moments of silence, her mind would wander to Dyke's family. She had been estranged from them even before his death. A complicated inheritance dispute had soured relations, layered with cultural expectations and buried resentments. She wondered now if the twins had any connection to his bloodline. The resemblance was uncanny, the timing suspicious. Questions began to build, each more urgent than the last. Who was Toby, truly? How had he come to claim these children, and what had happened to their mother? Unable to quell the storm in her heart, Amora resolved to dig deeper. Tomorrow would bring answers, and tomorrow she would demand truths, even if they hurt. For tonight, though, she allowed herself the liberty of hope, a fragile, trembling hope that she might at last discover a purpose beyond survival. Morning broke with routine's shattering intensity. The sunlight, golden and unforgiving, streamed through windows, still damp from last night's rain, casting the mansion in a glow that felt like revelation. Amora sat at her marble breakfast table, a spread of food untouched before her, as she prepared for the confrontation she knew was inevitable. Toby appeared, eyes bleary but determined, clutching the twins with protective arms. He wore pajamas provided by Noi, far too big for his thin frame, adding a touch of humility to his presence. Amora gestured for him to sit, the air between them charged with an expectancy that prickled across skin. "Eat," she said softly, pushing a plate toward him. Toby hesitated, looking as if kindness was a currency he'd never trusted. But the twins whimpered, and driven by hunger, he nibbled at the bread, his hands trembling. When the tension broke, Amora seized the moment. "Toby, last night you said the twins are your daughters," she began, her voice gentle but unwavering. "How did that happen? Where is your family?" Toby's face fell, shame flooding his features. He spooned formula into a bottle, stalling for time before answering. "I don't have a family, Ma," he replied, voice threadbare. "My mother died when I was little. Father left. I lived with my uncle, but he kicked me out when I brought the babies." "But the twins' mother?" Amora pressed. Toby's eyes glistened, words trembling out of reach. Her name was Chiamaka. She was 15. She lived down the street. We tried to be friends. She got sick after the babies came. Real sick. Her family wouldn't help. She died, Ma. I buried her in the old field. The confession hung in the air like morning mist. Painful, raw, irredeemable. Amora tried to process it. A child left to father children he barely understood, haunted by tragedy and forsaken by the very adults meant to protect him. "How did you survive?" Amora whispered, afraid of the answer. "Begging, mostly. Selling water, running errands, sleeping behind shops when no one chased me away," Toby said, his voice growing steadier with each word. "I did everything for my girls. They kept me alive, Ma. If I had lost them, I would have been gone too." Amora's eyes stung with unspent tears. The revelation shifted her understanding. This was not merely charity. It was redemption for a life perched perennially on the edge. Slowly, she reached across the table, her hand resting above Toby's, silent promise hanging in the gesture. He was safe now. Days blurred into weeks, marked by the relentless rhythm of healing and hope. The twins grew stronger, their cheeks no longer hollow, their cries no longer desperate. Toby adapted to the routines of mansion life with astonishing resilience. He followed instructions, learned new tasks, accepted kindness with careful gratitude, and became, in small ways, a part of the family he had never dared to dream of. Amora's world shifted on its axis. She found herself changed, her priorities rewired by the demands of parenthood and the complexity of Toby's existence. Business meetings became secondary. Her presence was increasingly required in the nursery, at doctor's appointments, during late-night feedings. There were moments of frustration when the past threatened to swallow her. But more often than not, she discovered joy in small victories. A twin's first laugh, Toby's careful study of a new book, the emergence of something pure and unbreakable in the bonds forged between strangers. Lessons bloom. Rumors began to swirl throughout Victoria Island's society. The Queen of Silence, once an emblem of isolation, was suddenly the subject of wild speculation. Some said she'd adopted an orphan family from the slums. Others gossiped about long-lost heirs and secret affairs. Amora ignored the noise, her focus sharpened by the needs that pulsed inside her home. In her growing relationship with Toby, Amora wrestled with the enormous pressures of parenthood, the uncertainties, the doubts, the invisible wounds that never quite heal. Her own history loomed with its complexities. Dyke's absence was sometimes a ghost in the nursery, sometimes a blessing. She began to quietly research the twins' heritage, tracing names through local hospitals, combing funeral records, searching for answers to questions she was not sure she wanted solved. One afternoon, after a particularly trying day of tantrums and teething, Amora sat with Toby beneath a jacaranda tree in the garden. The petals floated down like moments unstuck from time, painting the grass violet and blue. "Do you remember your mother?" Amora asked softly. Toby nodded, a serene, bittersweet smile on his lips. She was kind. She always let me sleep against her shoulder. She used to say, "Toby, life can kick you, but it can't keep you down." Amora clung to those words, storing them away as a reminder. There was strength in survival and softness in pain. These were the lessons a child had brought into her home, the seeds of something greater than herself. With the coming of spring, the mansion became a playground of rebirth. Flowers bloomed in every corner, filling the air with scents that seemed to erase every scrap of sorrow. The twins learned to crawl, their laughter echoing down marble corridors, their tiny hands gripping onto promise and hope as they took wobbly steps toward a life no longer threatened by rain or hunger. Toby found solace in the garden. He claimed a small patch of earth behind the main house where he planted cassava, okra, and hibiscus, a miniature farm born from nostalgia and necessity. Amora watched him work, sometimes silently, sometimes with an offer of help, and together they cultivated not only food, but faith. Neighbors grumbled about the change. Some whispered that Amora had lost her mind, that grief had made her reckless. Others brought gifts, clothes, toys, books, seeking favor or hoping to glimpse the children blessed by such fortune. Amora remained gracious but distant, protecting her sanctuary from intrusion. Only a few close confidants were allowed to visit, and even they sensed the delicate balance holding Amora's new life together. In the evenings, when the sun dipped low and the air cooled, Amora and Toby would share tea on the back terrace, the twins between them, their faces turned toward the future. Conversations wandered, dreams unfurled, and Amora learned to listen not as a benefactor, but as a friend. "You saved us," Toby said one night, his voice steady and sure. "No," Amora replied, her smile breaking through old sorrow. "You saved me." For the first time in years, Amora saw her world clearly. Not just as a series of contracts or ceremonies, but as a tapestry of messy, beautiful connections. She recognized that every act of kindness had the power to reshape destiny. In the twilight, with hearts opening and wounds healing, the garden became her cathedral, the children her congregation, and Toby her unlikely prophet of hope. As time proved the changes permanent, routines settled like roots into the life of the house. Yet challenges, like old wounds, rose to the surface. With the twins growing sturdier and more demanding, Amora found herself tested in ways she had never imagined. Diapers, fevers, and midnight awakenings arrayed themselves like new adversaries against her instincts for control. She, who had run corporations and navigated the labyrinth of high society without blinking, now stumbled in the simple chaos of an infant's cry. Toby adapted more quickly. He anticipated the twins' needs with a quiet grace, wiping their tears, fetching their bottles, and rocking them to sleep when they woke distraught. Sometimes, Amora would pause at the nursery door and watch him, struck by his gentle hands and the stories he whispered to soothe the girls. She realized, with surprise, that she was learning from him the value of presence, the language of reassurance, the subtle courage of not turning away from messes and fears. But not all lessons came easily. Occasionally, Toby's trauma surfaced. He startled awake from nightmares of rain and hunger, disoriented by the comfort that now surrounded him. He had to break habits shaped by leers on the streets, hiding food for later, flinching from raised voices, apologizing for existing. Amora refrained from correcting him directly, instead choosing to create patterns of consistency and safety. Always a hot meal, always a tender word, always the reassurance that he would not be sent away. Meanwhile, Amora struggled with her own anxieties. Was she doing enough? Was she, in her sudden guardianship, repeating the mistakes of parents and caretakers who had judged too harshly or intervened too late? The weight of responsibility pressed hard, and some nights she lay awake, tracing the silhouette of the twins in the moonlight, wondering what they would remember of these early days. Would they see her as a savior or a stranger? Yet, as the house coursed with new life, as laughter overtook loneliness, and small triumphs softened the edges of failure, Amora realized that family, like a garden, could only grow through patience and nurture. Whatever missteps lay ahead, they would face them side by side, discovering together the meanings of forgiveness and belonging. One humid afternoon, as thunder again threatened the horizon, the past arrived in the form of an unexpected visitor. A sharp ring echoed through the marble foyer, and Noi, startled, hurried to answer the door. There on the porch stood Chike Aranquo, Dyke's brother, Amora's brother-in-law, dressed in a crisp suit that seemed out of place in the sticky Lagos heat. Chike had always been the family diplomat, charming, smooth-talking, adept at masking his ambitions with velvet manners. He had not visited since Dyke's funeral, and even then had stayed only out of obligation. Now, his smile flickered with curiosity and calculation. "Amora," he greeted, his gaze skimming the hallway until it landed, inevitably, on the twins toddling behind Toby. There was an awkward pause as Amora ushered him inside, her mind whirring with questions. What did he want? Was he here for reconciliation, or was this merely the prelude to a legal skirmish over inheritance and propriety? She offered tea, which he declined with a polite wave. "I've been hearing stories in Victoria Island," he began conversationally, eyes fixed on the children. "Stories that have your name at their center. Or should I say, our family's name." Amora stiffened defensively. "If you've come to make threats, Chike, you are wasting your breath. These children are under my care. That's all you need to know." But Chike, sensing her resolve, shifted tactics. "Amora, we have always respected your decisions, even when we didn't understand them. But the Aranquo legacy is not yours alone. These twins," he paused, trying to puzzle out their resemblance to Dyke. "They look familiar. Are you sure there's nothing more to this than charity?" Amora met his gaze, steely and unwavering. "This is not a matter for the courts or the newspapers, Chaike. These children are in my life because fate demanded it. If the Orongquo name is so precious, maybe you should start by honoring its meaning: family, loyalty, compassion." Chaike looked as if he might argue, but thought better of it. With a sigh, he relented, pressing a business card into her palm. "If you ever need resources, you know how to reach me," he said, the elusive smile returning. Watching Toby herd the twins away, Chike's eyes softened. Perhaps even he, the consummate skeptic, sensed the authenticity in their bond. The encounter left Amora shaken. But as the evening descended, she resolved anew to shield her makeshift family from the shadowy manipulations of the past. Blood did not make family, love did, and she would fight for it, whatever the cost. Gradually, the sharp anxiety surrounding the Oronquo name faded, replaced by the soothing cadence of daily ritual. Each morning began with sunlight streaming through the nursery window, casting golden shapes on the walls. Amora became skilled at the ballet of bottles and bibs, learning to interpret the twins' wild babbling as secret languages. Toby, ever patient, delighted in inventing stories and games that turned even chores into adventure. The garden continued to flourish beneath their combined care. Amora invested in seeds and tools, arranging for agricultural books to be delivered, so Toby could learn about soil and seasonality. Together they watched cassava leaves unfurl, followed the slow swelling of okra pods, and felt pride in every pink hibiscus that blossomed. The staff, once skeptical of the new arrivals, adapted as well. Noi played the role of grandmother with increasing enthusiasm, singing soft Yoruba lullabies in the kitchen and teaching the twins how to knead dough. The chef, inspired by the presence of children, experimented with recipes that delighted their simple palates. Sweet cornbread, fried plantains, soft yam porridge. Even Karu, the stoic driver, found himself sneaking small toys and candies into the back seat on quiet days. Amora's heart began to soften, the rigid rituals of her old life dissolving in the presence of laughter and need. She attended fewer social events, preferring evenings spent in the backyard with a cup of tea, watching Toby chase the twins beneath the stars. Ambition dulled, replaced by a contentment she never could have predicted, one not earned by triumph, but by tenderness. She found herself dreaming again of family vacations, of laughter echoing in the halls, of a life not shaped by loss, but by hope in all its ordinary glory. Yet peace, though intoxicating, remained fragile. One night, the tranquility was pierced by the sharp blast of sirens and the thudding of fists against the front gate. Amora's heart leapt in her chest as she hurried barefoot to the foyer. There stood two uniformed officers and a grim-faced woman from social services, clipboard in hand. "We've received reports of minors living here," the woman stated not unkindly. "A boy and two girls, all motherless. We are here to investigate their welfare." Amora stood her ground, pulse racing. Toby appeared behind her, clutching the twins, eyes wide with remembered dread. The staff gathered protectively around them, Noi murmuring a prayer under her breath. "I have full guardianship over these children," Amora declared, voice clear and unwavering. "You may see their rooms, their medical records, meet the staff who care for them, but I will not allow you to frighten them. Please come in." The officials took their time, inspecting every detail. They questioned Toby gently, asked to see the twins' health charts, and made notes on the warmth and cleanliness of the nursery. After what felt like hours, the social worker approached Amora privately. "It's rare to see such devotion from someone outside the bloodline," she observed. "But I see no reason for concern. Be prepared, though. Children like these are always magnets for scrutiny. You're offering them a miracle. Make sure it lasts." Relief broke over Amora in waves. When the officers finally departed, Toby threw his arms around her waist, sobbing with relief. For a moment, Amora simply held him, determined never to let the forces of society or fate rip apart what they had built in that unlikely sanctuary. With each trial endured, the fragile web of trust between Amora, Toby, and the twins became stronger. What had begun as happenstance, carved from the misery of a city's streets and the loneliness of privilege, deepened into something alive, a living, breathing family, determined to outlast adversity. News of the social worker's clean report bolstered Amora's confidence. She hired a lawyer, a kindly woman named Ifeoma, to formalize Toby's guardianship and ensure the twins' legal status would be untouchable. She enrolled the children in local playgroups and brought in tutors, determined to give them a future untouched by want. For herself, Amora found her grief transformed. She stopped seeing Dyke's ghost at every corner, stopped measuring her success by what she'd lost. Instead, she began to celebrate what she was building, a legacy of love that transcended bloodlines and defied convention. Lessons bloom. One evening, after the twins fell asleep, Toby joined Amora in the study, holding an old photograph of Dyke. "Do you miss him?" he asked quietly. Amora smiled, her pain softened by time and by Toby's gentle honesty. "I do, but I think he'd be proud of us. I think he'd see what this family has become, and know that love is a seed that keeps growing, even in places you never expected." Toby nodded, and for the first time called her Mama. Tears came easily then, not of sorrow, but of gratitude for every twist of fate that had led her to this moment, for every struggle that had ended in embrace, and for every future day in which none of them would have to face the world alone. As the calendar drifted toward the year's end, Lagos prepared for its famed Festival of Light, a time when the city sparkled with lanterns, music poured from every street corner, and families old and new celebrated resilience and reunion. For the first time in years, Amora felt compelled to join in, wanting the twins and Toby to taste the joy of belonging in something larger than themselves. Together with Noi and the staff, Amora planned for days, sewing bright Ankara dresses for Chidma and Chisholm, choosing a crisp kaftan for Toby, and adorning her own form with a shimmering wrapper, gold jewelry winking against her skin. She taught Toby the riddles and proverbs her own mother once shared. In the evenings, they practiced the steps of a simple dance in the marble foyer, laughter chasing away the last shreds of shyness. On the festival night, the mansion transformed. Luminous lights threaded through the garden trees, illuminating the cassava plot where Toby's dreams had taken root. Drummers and singers, invited from across Victoria Island, filled the house with rhythms that reached into memory, reminding Amora of her own childhood, when joy had been uncomplicated. Toby was a revelation, his natural ease with rhythm and movement infectious, drawing even the most reserved staff into a conga of celebration. The twins toddled from lap to lap, giggling at the fireflies and clutching sweet puff-puffs with sticky fingers. Neighbors, once wary of Amora's reclusiveness, arrived bearing gifts of kola nuts and mangoes, their praise for the children spilling over with sincerity. In a moment of quiet amid the music, Amora found herself gazing at the garden, the lantern glow painting her guests in golden auras. How strange, she marveled softly, that from so much sorrow, happiness inched its way here, persistent as grass. Toby, catching her gaze, grinned. "Mama, you planted hope. That's what makes it grow." And as the night deepened and the lanterns swayed in the warm breeze, Amora felt a peace she'd never expected. Her home, once a citadel of solitude, now pulsed with belonging, laughter echoing out into the forgiving dark. The months after the festival brought both reward and uncertainty. Change, Amora realized, was as constant as the tides. Every respite soon gave way to new challenges. The twins, growing from infants to curious toddlers, demanded more attention than ever. Their personalities bloomed, Chidma bold and adventurous, always first to explore, while Chisholm was thoughtful, clinging to Amora with a softness that melted her heart. Toby, too, started to transform. Encouraged by Amora, he enrolled in school. His hunger for learning was insatiable. In the mornings, dressed in his uniform, he radiated hope, a boy once overshadowed by circumstance, now striding toward the future with tentative certainty. His classmates were skeptical at first, aware of the rumors surrounding his strange new family. But Toby soon won them over with his quiet intelligence and generous spirit, the way he never let a younger child be bullied or left behind. Amora faced her own trials, re-entering her business life slowly, carefully, juggling the role of entrepreneur and mother. There were days of doubt when an urgent board meeting clashed with a sick toddler's needs, or when the weight of expectation from the Oronquo legacy threatened to drown her hard-won confidence. But Ifioma, her now trusted advisor, coached her through each crisis, reminding her that it was possible to honor both work and family without losing herself. At home, small victories multiplied. The twins, once so frail, now raced through the hallways, their shrieks of joy as much a balm to the house as Amora's own laughter. Dinners became rituals where every member, Toby, Noi, Carew, even the often silent gardener, shared the highs and lows of their day. It was not always easy. Old hurts flared, mistakes were made, apologies tendered. But each evening closed in gratitude, the jagged edges of their collective history smoothing into something improbably whole. Amora realized then that family was not a perfection. It was in the honest, everyday act of trying. In early March, as the first rains washed dust from the city, a letter arrived for Toby, an envelope smeared with travel stains, addressed in an uncertain, looping hand. At first, Toby was wary, the old fear flickering behind his careful eyes. Amora, sensing his anxiety, encouraged him to open it at the breakfast table, silently promising that, whatever the contents, they would face it together. Inside, a single sheet, a brief note from Chiamaka's distant aunt, the last surviving link to the twins' mother. The words were simple, but they vibrated with the restless tension of loss and unfinished history. The aunt, newly sober and hopeful, apologized for her abandonment and offered a promise. If ever the children needed roots or answers, they would be welcome on her small farm in Anambra. A letter was like a stone tossed into the calm of their lives, disturbing, buried questions. That night, Toby sat brooding over the letter, torn between the gratitude he felt for Amora's unwavering care and a new, inexplicable yearning for connection to his past, a heritage he barely understood. Amora, too, felt the tension. Was it enough to offer love and safety, she wondered? Or did every child deserve to understand their beginnings, no matter how painful? After the twins fell asleep, she joined Toby on the garden bench. Under the gentle wash of moonlight, they talked through their options, not with the urgency of trauma, but with the tenderness of a family weighing their future together. In the end, they agreed. One day, when the twins were older and questions too loud to ignore, they would visit the aunt's farm. For now, Amora's house would remain their anchor, their home rooted not just in survival, but in choice. With time, the story of Amora and her children became legendary, both within their walled mansion and throughout the echoing avenues of Victoria Island. There was a ripple effect. Other families, inspired by her example, began fostering abandoned children, opening their doors to orphans and outcasts. The skeptical whispers faded, replaced by admiration and a subtle shift in community values. Yet Amora's greatest transformation took place not in the eyes of the world, but within herself. She made peace with her past, not erasing the loss of Dyke or the wounds from Dyke's family, but weaving them into the tapestry of her current life. She reached out to Cheek, inviting him to family dinners. To her surprise, he came, his formality relaxing with each gathering, his affection for the twins unexpectedly genuine. There were moments of raw, difficult honesty, when Toby asked about his mother, or the twins cried for reasons words could not reach. In these moments, Amora learned the final, hardest lesson of motherhood: that sometimes all you can offer is presence, a steady hand, and a heart open to forgiveness. She apologized to Toby for any coldness during those first fraught days. And to the twins, she read stories of brave heroes who had also felt lost before finding their homes. Slowly, forgiveness became a habit, extended to herself most of all. The mansion, once a monument to suffering and pride, became instead a living memory, a sanctuary where joy and sorrow could entwine together without shame. Years passed, and the children grew. Toby into a young man ready for university, the twins into strong, bright daughters, each marked by resilience, but shaped now, first and foremost, by love. Amora watched them with swelling pride as they moved confidently through a world that had once seemed intent on denying them sanctuary. The night before Toby left for university, the family gathered around the dinner table, laughter and memory wrapping them like a quilt. Amora stood to make a small toast. "We began as strangers," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But we chose each other every day. Whatever the world says, this is how family is made. Not by blood, but by courage and love." Toby nodded, tears threatening. "You taught me how to be a father, Mama, and a son, and a brother. You gave me a place to dream." Chidma and Chisholm echoed him in teasing voices. "Mama, we love you." In that moment, Amora caught a glimpse of eternity, a legacy not found in money nor in a cold, empty house, but in the laughter and hope planted through years of risk and care. Outside, beneath the jacaranda tree, the garden blossomed as ever, rooted in the patient work of broken hearts and second chances. No one could have predicted that rain-soaked afternoon would change the meaning of home. But as dawn crept in, Amora felt the echo of her late husband's voice on the morning breeze. Love, ever ancient, ever new, makes all things possible. And so, with the rising sun flooding her home, the Queen of Silence became at last the Mother of Hope, a title earned not in solitude, but in the promise of tomorrow.